The morning I found her letter, I was standing in the kitchen making tea I didn't want. It had been sitting in the back of a drawer for 41 years. I had forgotten it was there. Or maybe I had pretended to forget. There is a difference, and at 85, I finally know which one it was. Her handwriting was still the same, that looping, unhurried cursive she had, and she had written just one line. Not a paragraph, not a page. Just one line that has not left me since I read it that morning with my cold tea and my quiet kitchen and all my years sitting heavy on my chest. I'm not going to tell you what that line said. Not yet. Because to understand what it meant, you first have to understand who I was when I didn't read it the first time. My name is Harold Emerson. I am 85 years old, and I am sitting in the same armchair I have sat in for the last 30 years, in a house that has slowly gone quiet around me. My daughter calls on Sundays. My joints ache in the cold. I drink too much tea and I sleep lightly, and sometimes in the space between sleeping and waking, I hear a voice I haven't heard in a very long time. I am not recording this because I think I have something important to say. I'm recording this because I feel time the way you feel weather now. Not in days or weeks, but in something thicker and closer. And there is one thing I carried for 60 years that I need to put down somewhere before I go. I grew up in a small town in the north of England, the kind of town where everyone knew your father's name before they knew yours. My father was a quiet man who worked with his hands and never once told me he loved me, not because he didn't, but because where we came from, love was something you showed through showing up, not through saying. You repaired the fence. You put food on the table. You stayed. I understood that language. I learned to speak it fluently. What I didn't understand was that not everyone speaks the same language, that some people need the words, that some hearts cannot read silence, no matter how full that silence is. I was 24 when I met her. Her name was Catherine. She was sitting in the back corner of a small cafe in Leeds, reading a book with a broken spine, and she had tucked her feet under herself on the chair in a way that seemed entirely unconcerned with what anyone might think. That was the first thing I noticed. Not her face, not her hair. The fact that she occupied space like she had a right to it. I did not speak to her that day. I ordered my coffee, sat 3 tables away, and watched her read for 40 minutes until she closed her book, gathered her coat, and walked out without once looking in my direction. I thought about her for 3 weeks. The second time I saw her was at a mutual friend's flat. Some crowded Saturday night with cigarette smoke and someone's record player and too many people talking too loudly about things they only half believed. She was in the kitchen, washing a glass that wasn't even hers because she said she needed something to do with her hands. I know that feeling now. I didn't know it then. We talked for 2 hours in that kitchen, about books, about our fathers, about whether it was possible to be lonely in a room full of people. She said yes without hesitating. I said I wasn't sure. She looked at me with this expression, not quite pity, not quite amusement, and said, "You'll figure it out." I didn't know she was already seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself. We began spending time together the way young people do, slowly and then all at once. Sunday walks that stretched into the evening without either of us noticing. Long phone calls that were really just 2 people not wanting to say goodbye yet. She had a laugh that arrived in her eyes a full second before it reached her mouth, and I used to watch for it. That small delay, like watching for lightning before the sound. I was not easy to love, I think. I was punctual and practical, and I believed that being reliable was the same as being present. I showed up. I fixed things. I planned. When something was broken between us, I would solve it. Make a decision, take action, move forward. Without ever once sitting still long enough to feel it first. She felt everything first. She felt everything slowly and completely, the way water fills a glass. And I skimmed the surface and called it swimming. There were nights she would go quiet, in a way that was different from ordinary quiet, and I would ask what was wrong, and she would say nothing, and I would believe her. Because I wanted to. Because believing her was easier than sitting in the uncertainty of not knowing. Because silence to me had always meant peace. I was wrong about that for a very long time. By the time I was 27, Catherine and I had been together for nearly 3 years. We were talking, in that vague and circular way couples do, about the future, about what came next. I remember a Sunday in October, rain against the windows. She made soup from whatever was left in the kitchen, the kind of meal that isn't a recipe, just attention. and we sat across from each other at her small table and ate in comfortable silence. At least I thought it was comfortable. She put her spoon down about halfway through and looked at me. She said, "Harold, do you actually see me?" I said, "What do you mean?" "I'm looking right at you." She nodded slowly, picked her spoon back up, finished her soup. I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say. I remember thinking she's in one of her moods. I remember thinking she'll be fine tomorrow. She was fine tomorrow. I never asked her what she meant. We got engaged the following spring. I bought a ring. I asked her father. I proposed on a Saturday afternoon in the park where we had walked 100 times, and she said yes, and she cried, and I held her and felt, genuinely felt, that I was the luckiest man alive. And I just didn't know what to do with luck. The engagement lasted 2 years. I had started at an engineering firm and was climbing the way young men climb. Head down, hours long, eyes on the next step. I was building something, a life. Our life, I told myself. Catherine was a teacher. Primary school, 7-year-olds. She came home exhausted in a way that was different from my exhaustion. Softer and sadder. She would tell me about her students at dinner, and I would listen with half my attention while reviewing the day in my head, sorting problems, making mental lists. She noticed. She didn't say much, but she noticed. One evening, maybe 8 months before the wedding date we had set, she came home from her sister's house and sat on the sofa and didn't take her coat off. I came in from the kitchen and looked at her, and something in me went very still. "I don't think I can do this," she said. I sat down beside her. I asked what she meant. She said, "And I think you love me the best way you know how. And I think it isn't enough for me. And I think I've been trying to be enough for both of us for a long time, and I'm very, very tired." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "Tell me what to change. I'll change it." She looked at me, and I will never forget this look, not in all the years I have lived since. She looked at me with something that was not anger and not sadness, but something quieter and more final than either. She said, "And that's the thing, Harold. I can't tell you. You have to already know." She left 3 weeks later, not dramatically. No shouting, no broken things. She packed her belongings over a quiet weekend, and her brother came with a car, and she hugged me at the door for a long time, longer than I expected. And then she was gone. I stood in the hallway for a very long time after. I thought, I'll fix this. Give her a week. She'll come back when she's less upset. But she wasn't upset. That was the thing I couldn't understand then. She wasn't upset. She was clear. I didn't grieve Catherine properly when she left. Grief to me felt like a thing you moved through as quickly as possible. I was back at work within the week. I was functional. I was fine. I told everyone I was fine. I dated other women over the following years. Some of them were wonderful. There was a woman named Judith in my early 30s who had a warm and easy quality about her, the kind of person who makes a room feel larger just by being in it. We were together for almost 2 years, and then quietly, without drama, I let that slip away too. Same pattern. Different woman. Same hollow space in the middle of me that I kept insulating with work and routine. By 40, I had stopped wondering what was wrong with me and started accepting it. I did eventually marry. Her name was Margaret. We met at a colleague's dinner party, and she was no-nonsense and funny and had very little patience for pretension. We married when I was 42. We had one daughter, our Frances, who is 53 now and calls me on Sundays and sounds more like her mother with every passing year, which is the greatest comfort I have. Margaret was a good woman, and I loved her. I loved her steadily and quietly and through decades of showing up. We built a real life, a full one, but I always knew, and I believe she always knew, that I was a man with a room inside him he kept locked. She died 6 years ago, quickly, mercifully, a heart that had been quietly failing and then one morning simply stopped. Frances was with her. I was on my way. I didn't make it in time. That is its own weight, which I carry separately. After Margaret died, I began the slow process of sorting through a shared life. 40 years of accumulated objects. Papers, photographs, the small artifacts of a marriage. It was in the bottom drawer of the old writing desk, my desk, which had come with me from my very first flat, that I found the envelope. It was sealed. Her name was not on the outside, just mine in that handwriting. Harold. I held it for a long time before I opened it. I was 80 years old, alone in my study, holding an unopened letter from a woman I hadn't spoken to in over 50 years. A woman who, I would later learn, had died herself just 3 years earlier, quietly, in the north of France, where she had made her life. I opened it carefully. One page, one paragraph, one line at the bottom, underlined. She had written it just before the wedding that didn't happen. It had been tucked inside something of mine and moved without anyone knowing. 51 years in a drawer. I read it. I'm not going to tell you everything she wrote. Some things are not mine to share even now. But the line she underlined was this: I didn't need you to be more. I only ever needed you to let me in. I had to put the letter down. I sat in that study for a very long time. I think about what she meant by that often. I think I understand it now in a way I couldn't have at 27, because at 27 I didn't know that I had walls. I thought I was just private. I thought keeping my inner life to myself was a form of strength. That unburdening myself to another person would make me somehow less. What I didn't see was that intimacy is not vulnerability as weakness. It is vulnerability as invitation. It is the act of saying, here is the room I usually keep locked, and I'm choosing to open the door for you. Catherine was knocking on that door for years. I never heard it. I've been trying to understand where that locked room came from. My father, probably. His father before him. That whole inheritance of quiet men who loved fiercely and silently, and expected the people around them to understand without being told. My father held my mother's hand in the hospital at the end. For 3 days he sat there and held her hand and didn't speak and didn't cry, and my aunt told me later she'd never seen anything so heartbreaking or so devoted in her life. He loved her completely. She knew it, but she had told me once, not long before she died, that there were times in their marriage, long stretches of ordinary years, when she had felt desperately, quietly alone. He loved her. She was lonely. Both things true at the same time. I understand that now in my bones. There were evenings when Margaret would say something to me, something small, something personal, and I would make a sound of acknowledgement and keep reading or keep watching the television, and she would go quiet after, and I would not notice the quality of that quiet. That quiet. I notice it now in retrospect, spreading through years of evenings like water through cloth. She never said she was unhappy, but unhappiness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just slowly fills the quiet spaces you leave around it. I want to tell you about one specific evening. Frances was maybe 7 years old. It was a summer evening, still light at 8 o'clock, and she had come downstairs after being put to bed and said she couldn't sleep and could she sit with me. I was tired. I was always tired in those years. I said yes, but kept my eyes on the document I was reviewing. She sat beside me on the sofa, and after a few minutes she put her hand over my hand on the papers. Just rested it there. I looked down at her hand, small and certain. I put the papers down. We sat there in the evening light, not talking, and after a while she fell asleep against my shoulder, and I sat very still for a long time so as not to wake her. That evening is one of the things I'm most grateful for in my entire life. Not for anything I did, just for the fact that once I put the papers down. I wish I had put the papers down more often. Frances came to visit last month. She stayed for a week. She cooked. She made me walk with her each morning, which I pretended to resent and actually loved. We watched old films in the evenings, and she fell asleep on the sofa in the exact same way she had at 7, and I sat very still and didn't move so as not to wake her. Some things come back around. On the last morning before she drove to the station, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Dad, are you afraid?" I said, "Of some things, yes." She asked what. I said that I spent too much time being careful and not enough time being open. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You opened up with me. More than you knew." I couldn't speak. She hugged me at the door for a very long time. I let her. I have been trying, in these last years, to practice a thing I was never taught. I don't have a word for it. It's something like letting the moment be what it is, without immediately moving on to the next one. Sitting with a feeling long enough to actually feel it, rather than categorizing it and filing it away. I've had moments, sitting in this chair, watching the light change in the afternoon, where I felt something I can only describe as here, fully here. Not planning, not reviewing, not building or solving, just present in the room, in the moment, in this body that has carried me for 85 years. Those moments are, I think, what I was chasing all along without knowing what I was chasing. They were available at any ordinary Tuesday evening. If I had only known how to stop, The letter is in the top drawer now, the one in my bedroom. I read it sometimes, not to punish myself. I gave that up some years ago, but because her words remind me of something I want to keep knowing. I didn't need you to be more. I only ever needed you to let me in. I think she was not only speaking about herself, I think she was speaking about everyone I would ever love and who would ever love me for the rest of my life. The door was always enough. The opening of it was all that was required, and I spent 60 years convinced that I had to be better, more accomplished, more certain before I could open it, before I had earned the right to be fully known. Nobody was waiting for any of that. They were just waiting for the door. I do not regret my life. I want to be careful about that because this might sound like a document of regret, and it is not. I had a real marriage with a real woman who knew me better than she ever let on. I have a daughter who fills me with more pride than I know what to do with. I had a career that engaged me. I had Sunday mornings with the paper. I had cricket in summer. I had the smell of good food in a warm kitchen and the feeling of a child's hand resting on mine without asking for anything. I had a life. What I wish I had known sooner is simply this. The love was never the problem. There was always enough love. It was the withholding of myself that made the love feel insufficient to others. The armoring, the distance dressed up as strength. If I had known at 25 what Catherine's letter told me at 80, that the only thing required was the opening of the door, I think I might have lived the same life. The same people, the same moments, the same table and the same chair. But I would have been more fully there for all of it, more fully known and therefore more fully in it. That's all. That's the thing. I am 85 years old, and I am tired in the way that is not unpleasant. The kind of tired that comes at the end of a long day that had good things in it. Francis calls on Sunday. The chair is worn in the shape of me. The light in the afternoon, this time of year, comes through the window at an angle I have loved for 30 years without once telling anyone. If you made it this far, if you sat with me through all of this, I want you to know I feel that. If anything here stirred something in you, a person, a memory, a door of your own, sit with that a little while. You don't have to do anything with it. Just let it be there.